Good evening, folks, or if you're catching this in the AM, good morning, happy Thursday. We're going to start you off with space weather. Here's the GOES X-ray flux, and we're looking at the X-ray light emissions coming off our sun on the Earth-facing side. And once again, we're dull activity looking at the 3-day chart, but really nothing. A slight rise in protons, which I thought would be expected with the massive explosion that occurred the other day. It was a backside explosion, but you know, everything is connected in its own way. A little bit of a flux on the GOES magnetometer. We're seeing slight PC1 pulsations here on the induction magnetometer out of Kokona, Alaska at the HARP facility. We're also going to take a look at the magnetic flux from Kokona, and here it is. This is only looking at a plot scale of 200 NT. We're really not seeing too much of a disturbance right now. Steady as she goes. Here's a look at our sun from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Thank you, NASA, for that. And it's looking pretty calm. Unfortunately, we've been quite bored watching the sun over the past few months, and some people are confused as to why solar maximum hasn't really kicked in. There's one solar physicist thinking that there's going to be a double effect at the end of 2013. It's just going to be wild. But he's the only one, and we'll see what happens. I'm under the theory right now that we're moving towards a new Maunder minimum. Maybe a mini ice age. And I think this slowdown on the sun is having a real big effect here on planet Earth. Here's looking at the sun on the 171 angstrom. There's some nice coronal loops spawning from sunspot to sunspot. And we'll switch it over to the the 304. Sorry. One special feature looking at it in this angstrom is you really get to see the prominences that come off the side of the sun. Now, those prominences are these big channels of plasma, and they pillar off the sun, and on the side of the sun that's a prominence. When it's looking right at us, it's a filament, and right there that's a filament, and that one's growing. We'll see if it stays stable the whole time there on the Earth-facing side. Moving on to weather, there's your snowfall 12-hour forecast. Looks like the west coast is going to get some precipitation along with New England, but I told you that yesterday. Here's looking at the infrared from COD, and you can see why you're getting the weather you're getting there. Here's Doppler from the National Weather Service. And your wind chills. You know, I'm down here in Florida, I'm telling you. It's 50 degrees, we're cold. We're real cold. And as you can see, there's a lot of that northern air being pulled down, looking at the wind map. And we'll pull out and get a larger view here in just a second. And we have a lot of northern air coming down the east coast. A lot. It looks like maybe a pressure system might strengthen up there. Moving from the west coast. We'll see. Moving on to earthquakes. The Prince Edward Islands has been shaking quite frequently over the past 2 days, and it's close enough to the poles to keep my eye on it. Anytime I see any quakes along the top and the bottom of the world, it piques my interest. It definitely does. Here's a 4.5 in Mexico, nothing to see here, but a 3.4 in Oklahoma. Don't just think it's geological, you know. Fracking's a big deal. It's amazing the things we do for energy. It's ridiculous. You know, like excavating all the salts out of a salt brine so you can fill it with radioactive materials or crude oil or natural gas. And what we're looking at right here is the effect of such a pompous plan, in my opinion. How dare we treat our Earth like this? That was the first flyover we ever got of the Louisiana sinkhole. And here's the most recent, taken on 3-1. What you saw before was, 500 square feet, and what you're looking at now is getting close to 6 acres. There's water as far as the eye can see. There's a question as to where this water is coming from, by the way. Why is there water? It's a sinkhole. Also, the oil sheens. It's not fun to look at. And why isn't this making the news? And why isn't this being talked about? Yeah, maybe if it was right underneath somebody's house and that person died, it would be talked about by the media over and over and over the course of 24 hours. Maybe, this sinkhole is 20 feet wide, it's 50 feet deep, and because it was right under a house and somebody died, we get news stories about how they finally raised the house, they've demolished all the walls, and now they know how deep it is. Well, there's 350 people who were kicked out of their homes forcibly put under evacuation because of Texas brine, because of but wait, where does a company like this get the authority to excavate a mile-wide salt brine? Why don't you go ahead and think about that while I leave you with some pretty awesome images of Mount Etna's eruption from just a night ago. The Earth's pretty cool, When it's not shaking, there's volcanoes. When there's no volcanoes, it's shaking. There's a balance. There's a balance to it all. Peace and love, guys. Propagate against the hate and be safe as always.